What's going on, Helldivers? My name is Dadpool, and in today's video we'll be going over the recent patch notes that dropped today, June 13th, 2024. We'll call this one 0.400. Alright, so in this video I'm actually going to go over the meat and potatoes, which is what players I think want, in my opinion, which are these stratagem, weapon, and balance changes. I will leave the link to the patch notes in the description if you want to check them out yourself. Balancing. Go with stratagem balance changes with this patch. These balance changes, we wanted to buff up some of the weaker stratagems to make them more viable and add more possibility of variety in the loadouts. We also changed a few to make them more consistent, but the goal was to keep a similar or higher power level. We are looking into stratagems more to see if any of the other stratagems that might need some buffs or changes to make them more viable. We also want to be better at explaining what our goals are with the changes. Please see the linked blog post for more information. Okay, so right off the bat, I could say with full conviction that the bug front has been sort of meta-driven by having to utilize 500 kg versus Bile Titans in almost every loadout, so I'm excited to see what changes are in here. Alright, so Rocket Sentry. Okay, the wording here is kind of confusing, so I'll put it in layman's terms. And I'll prioritize large targets at a max range of 100 meters with only one rocket per salvo to increase its quote-unquote economy. It has an increased projectile damage from 200 to 300, but can now no longer damage heavy armored enemies. Alright, so top faceplates of a Strider, it's not going to take them down. This looks like a nerf on paper. I'll have to see the interactions in game before giving an official opinion on this one. The Machine Gun Sentry had its cooldown decreased from 180 to 120 seconds, as well increased durability from 0% to 80% for the following. We have the Machine Gun Sentry, the Gatling Sentry, the Rocket Sentry, the Autocannon Sentry, and the Motor Sentry, and the EMS Motor Sentry. These are all very great changes in my opinion, as eradicate missions or defense missions heavily use these types of sentries, and if they are struck, they are typically taken out pretty quick, and their cooldowns are decently long between. So the reduced cooldown as well as the durability added to these sentries should see a little bit more play with these items. The HMG emplacement had its rotation speed increased by 100%. Finally, somebody lubricated this thing as it moved slower than a snail on a turtle. The anti-personal minefield as well as the incendiary mines received an increase to both of their damage. The orbital Gatling received an increase in fire rate by 25%. It increased the rounds per salvo from 30 to 60. Increased armor pen to heavy armored enemies, that's amazing, and decreased cooldown from 80 seconds to 70 seconds. Big changes here with the orbital Gatling. I honestly never touched this thing, but with its shortened cooldown and increase to damage, I can see this being a great call-in for patrols or breaches. The orbital precision strikes had its cooldown decreased from 100 to 90 seconds. That's great. Decreased spawn and call-in time from 4 seconds to 2 seconds. This is also great. This is your first stratagem. This is going to let things go a little bit faster, especially when trying to take out your Bile Titans. The orbital airburst strike, already a great stratagem, had its cooldown decreased from 120 to 100 seconds. Now this thing is perfect for bug breaches. Now it's even better with the decrease in cooldown. The 110mm rocket pods, a little weird disclaimer they put here. While these changes may look like a straight up nerf, this is not the intention. Please see the blog post for more information. So it has improved targeting, increased projectile armor pen. Now it does 100% damage to heavily armored enemies instead of 50%. Decreased projectile damage from 600 to 250. Yeah, I can see why they had to say that. Targeting and extra damage from the increased armor pen. Decreased explosion and penetration. Explosion can no longer damage heavily armored enemies. It's very confusing. We'll have to see the interaction that is actually within the game, but for now we'll take it with a grain of salt. The Eagle Strafing Run increased its uses from 3 to 4, increased armor pen, and can now damage heavily armored enemies. Just like the Gatling, orbital Gatling, this is a welcomed change. I should see more, and you should see more of this used in your games as well, as these are very big changes to these stratagems. The grenade launcher saw an increase in its explosion damage from 350 to 400. The HMG had its increased projectile damage from 100 to 150 and increased projectile damage against durable body parts from 23% to 33% to increase its fire rate from 450, 750, 900 to 450, 600, and 750, and decreased reload time from 7 to 5.5 seconds, and increased its stagger strength. Very big changes to the HMG. These changes sound like they'll be very useful when going against the Automaton faction. Okay, so the machine gun, the first special weapon stratagem you get, had its reload time decreased from 4 to 3.5 seconds. It had its increased max amount of magazines from 3 to 4. Okay, so machine gun sentry, Gatling sentry, and Patriot exosuits Gatling increased their projectile damage from 80 to 90, and increased their projectile damage against durable body parts from 7.5 to 25%. Big change there. Very big change for the machine gun stratagems here. The Liberator, the Stalwarts, and the Guard Dog all saw an increase to projectile damage against durable body parts from 10 to 23%. Very big change here again. The Liberator Concussive saw an increase in projectile damage against durable body parts from 23 to 35%. I'll have to see the actual damage stats on this weapon before I even touch it. The BR Tech 1.4 Adjudicator saw an increase in magazine capacity from 25 to 30. Very welcome change, as the magazine capacity of this weapon is very small, and saw an increased projectile damage against durable body parts from 10% to 20%, doubling what it was doing already. Great weapon already, probably the best AR that is currently in the game. I'll have to make that judgment after these changes. The Tenderizer saw an increase in projectile damage from 60 to 95. That is huge. That is what a Tenderizer sounds like. Increased projectile damage against durable body parts from 10% to 17%. Decreased ammo capacity from 35 to 30, and decreased number of magazines from 10 to 8. Still a lot. And increased its stagger strength. That sounds very good. Very good changes there. The Purifier saw an increase in projectile armor penetration to be the same as the Explosion, and decreased explosion damage fall off. Be curious to see how that interaction works in game, as this weapon was unusable for me at launch. Speaking about weapons I didn't use at launch, the Explosive Crossbow saw big changes. Increased to explosion armor penetration to be the same as the projectile. Increased demolition strength. It can now destroy bug holes, thank the Lord, as well as bot fabricator buildings like we saw in the leaked footage of this weapon. And added the medium penetration tag. The Eruptor saw an increase in total damage from 420 to 570 per shot. Nothing regarding the shrapnel changes that were made to this weapon. I'll be curious to see if they'll end up adding those back in. The Diligence Sniper projectile damage was increased to durable body parts from 10 to 25%. Very big change there. Little disclaimer they put at the bottom of this, it says that some enemies have durable body parts that receive a portion of base damage from projectiles. Okay, this section says other. It was a little confusing at first, so I had to read a couple times. It says updated recoil stance modifiers. We made changes to the recoil stance modifiers to make them more consistent and reward being prone more. Almost all the modifiers were improved with the exception of 2 were made worse by 10%. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk about in this video is a special weapon that was actually talked about for a while. It's going to be buffed, which in a sense it was buffed, but we have lost the ability to target bot fabricators, as well as I'm assuming the factory striders, as this disclaimer here under fixes says the FAF Tech 1.4 Spears targeting has been reworked and should now function much better. However, it has lost the ability to target automaton spawners. It's not intended and should be fixed in the future. And with that said, that's going to be it for the video, guys. If you want to check out the patch notes for yourself, a link will be in the description, as well as the blog post mentioned a couple times within the patch notes will also be in the description for you to check out as well. If you guys enjoyed the video or were happy you didn't have to read that balance change to weapons and stratagems, consider hitting that like button. It would greatly be appreciated. If you would like to stay up to date with my future content, consider subscribing, as it helps out this small channel immensely. I go live on YouTube most Wednesdays through Friday nights around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As well, take a look at my shorts page if you ever want to know which armor sets are currently in rotation within the Superstore. But that's going to be it. Guys, thanks again, and take care, everybody.